Hi, my name is Lena. Welcome to my channel, and I'd like to talk to you about my personal impressions of the Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer. And talking about that, I'd like to try and compare it to uh, Decameron by Giovanni Boccaccio. I think a year ago there was a read-along on BookTube, um, hosted by Adam from mementomori, and I'll try and leave links to his videos into info box. So let's try and do that. Decameron, Giovanni Boccaccio's book, was written at about 1353. So it was written before Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. Sorry. So Boccaccio wrote this compilation of short stories when he was still a very young man. And he said himself that he wrote them to entertain women because men at least have their hunting and other social activities, and women are locked up at home. So he wrote for them the stories just to cheer them up. But later on, as an older man, he asked his friends not to give his book to their mothers and sisters, so to women of their house. So later on, he changed his mind about this book, his opinion about women, and he was quite ashamed of this book, but he could not destroy it because it became quite popular in a way that he found very unfortunate. It became kind of a compilation of dirty stories for that merchants and people of different trades, so educated men of a lower status liked and prefer. Also, by our standards, everything that's slightly erotic goes on behind the scenes, so it's mostly intention and infidelity in marriage. So Chaucer started, and I'm sorry guys, one more moment. It's the the frame for the collection, the frame story for the entire collection is a plague in Italy. So there is a plague in Italy. I think it's Black Death, and seven highborn and wealthy women and three noble young men decide to go to the countryside, live in the countryside, and wait for the Black Death to pass, to end. And to entertain themselves, they tell stories from Monday to Friday for 2 weeks. So there are 10 of them. Each of them tells a story. So it's 10 stories per day, 20 day, 10 days. I'm sorry. So it's 1,000 stories. Is it? Or is it? It's 100 stories. I'm sorry, guys. So, and this book is finished, of course. Chaucer started to read, he had a very interesting life, and I think his biography, if there is any, is very well worth reading. But he started to write this book, this compilation of stories, very late in his life. He was a widower by that time, and he retired from court, so he was quite an old man, and he did not finish. So this chunk of a book, this monster of a book, is actually half of the stories he wanted to write. Those are stories told by pilgrims on their way to Canterbury. Canterbury. Sorry, guys. But Chaucer wanted them to tell a story each on their way back as well. So this book should have been twice as big. To tell the truth, I don't know how many stories in it. It's a lot, but the book is not finished. And the frame story for this collection is that pilgrims, people of different walks of life, on their way to Canterbury, to St. Thomas grave, I think, they tell each other stories. And it's a very good idea because in this way, Chaucer could have people of different status at the same time, in the same place, socializing, communicating, talking to each other. Each of them has their own voices. So, for example, a knight tells a story about love and about chivalry and about rivalry and about death. A lawyer tells a story about a devoted Christian, a woman, and a sailor tells a story about a monk bribing his friend's wife to have sex with him and paying her with his friend's money. So we have different voices, different stories that could be told by people of different status, and it's much more decent than the Decameron stories, but still it has ass-kissing jokes and farting jokes. I can imagine a young lady reading it and enjoying it, but I cannot imagine her telling her husband that she quite enjoyed this little story about infidelity with ass-kissing joke, the one with ass-kissing joke. So, and the story was quite good, actually. It was very funny, with a little funny twist at the end that you totally cannot see coming. But unfortunately, it has this joke in it, which actually helps to move the story forward. So, what was in this book, in Decameron, it was first time when stories were told about lower people of a lower status, about tradesmen, about merchants, about people of different trades. But the stories were told by noble women, and in Geoffrey Chaucer's tales, each of these lower class people kind of have a representative and a voice. let's talk about women in these stories. Canterbury Tales were written much, sorry guys, after the Decameron, much later, and we can tell that Geoffrey Chaucer, he read Decameron, and he actually used a name of one of the main characters in Decameron as a name for a supporting character in one of his tales, and he also used some of the stories are his own, but some of the stories he took from Decameron but rewrote them, and sometimes he passed his own opinion and judgment on them. We are joined by my cat, sorry. So, for example, there is a tale that a lawyer tells about this devoted Christian woman, Constance. It reminded me very much of one of the most outrageous tales from Decameron, Boccaccio. In Decameron, we have a tale when a young maiden, a princess, is shipped to be married to. Sorry, guys, I do not remember to whom, but the point is she never reaches her destination. I think pirates attack and everyone on her ship is killed, and she is such a beautiful girl, such a beautiful young woman that the captain of pirates marries her, and then somebody else sees her who murders the captain and marries her, and this motive repeats. The story repeats itself 8 more times or 7 more times. So basically, sorry, the story in Decameron about this girl, it actually written to tell us about this young woman who in a very short period of time had 9 different lovers, 9 different husbands, but basically that she was raped nine times. But in Geoffrey Chaucer, we have this lawyer's tale about Constance, and this tale immediately reminded me about the Boccaccio tale, but I cannot tell you why. And this is a very different tale altogether. So we have Constance, a very young, very beautiful maiden, and she is shipped to marry a sultan because his spies saw her and liked her and told him about her beauty. So she is shipped to marry a sultan. She reaches her destination. She marries him. And she actually converts him to Christianity. But his mother wants to be a queen herself, this sultan's mother, and she gathers people who don't want to become Christians to become Christians, and they murder Sultan, and they put Constance on the ship. I guess she reached the Sultan, but everybody on her ship were dead by then. So it's actually Christ kind of steered her boat, so because of the Christ she reached her destination. And after killing Sultan, his mother puts her bags on the ship. Constance have provision and water, but she has nobody to steer the ship, and doesn't matter. She reaches another port where she meets another king, and I guess everybody around her are converted to Christianity by her as well. So it's a very different kind of tale from the Boccaccio's tale. Although Constance is pretty passive in this tale, she is just a very devoted Christian, and she prays constantly. So let's talk about another tale which outraged me in Boccaccio, and which was still quite outraging in Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury tales, although he, in this particular tale, he passes his judgment. He says that basically he advises the reader not to do it at home. So we have a, a nobleman who marries a pretty, very well brought up, very obedient, very prudent, very not shy, but very self-conscious woman of a lower class. I think she is probably a sorry guys, herdsman daughter. So her father, the one who looks after sheep, I think. So she's a very low-born woman, but she's beautiful, and she is full of very, very good qualities. So, but he wants to test her, his wife. He wants to test her. He wants to see that she will stay obedient, that she will stay prudent, that she will be quiet. And so when she uh, gives him a daughter first, he says that he wanted a son, that he is not happy about this daughter, and that he wants to kill this daughter. And she allows him to do that because she is his wife. She should obey him. So he took this daughter, to his own sister, where this daughter is brought up in love and in abundance of everything, but this poor woman, she thinks that her daughter is dead. Next, she gives him a son, a heir, but her husband tells that people say that it's not his son, so he wants to kill him as well, that he's the son of a low-born woman, something like that. So once again, he says to his wife that he killed his son, and he ships his son to his sister, where he is brought up. Later on, he tells his wife that actually he wants to divorce her and wants to marry a young and very high-born and very wealthy woman. And she's an obedient wife. She returns to her father. But it's not enough. He sends for his wife, his ex-wife, and says that he wants to prepare the house and the feast for his bride. So she obediently does everything that is required of her. Gladly, happily, in a good spirits. So um, when this one young bride arrives, it's actually his daughter, um, and his son. They arrive, and of course he tells his wife that he never wanted to divorce her, that he very happy about his choice, and that those grown up children are actually her children. But it was very irritating tale. I wanted something different. I wanted something very much like uh, hello, a French tale by sorry guys, I cannot remember the name of the tale. It's Bonjour, Triste. It's hello, sadness. Sorry, I will leave a link in it to it into info box. So a tale where everything should be all right again in the morning, but one coincidence, one chance event ruins everything. So I would make this husband suffer consequences. But it's not my tale, it's a very old tale, and it's a produce of that time. Geoffrey Chaucer says that a husband shouldn't do this to his wife when he has no reason whatsoever doubt her, that he shouldn't test her. But still, he tells us this story from start to finish, the way it's told in Decameron. And the next story I wanted to talk about is a child grief story, and it's a reef's tale. And I want to talk about it to tell you that some of the stories were actually oral tradition or oral folklore, and they were kind of universal. I think this uh, child creep story or child cradle story was French, but it was translated in many languages. I think Fariba from Medieval Reader talked about that, and I'll try to link her video into info box. So basically, it's a story that is present in Decameron, Boccaccio, and in Geoffrey Chaucer tales, and it's a story where a family with a young daughter and with a wife with a small child entertain students or young men. So it's basically when in one room house this young guests they stay for a night in this one room in different beds, and in the middle of the night the wife goes to the bathroom, and when she returns she tries to find her husband's bed by the cradle with the child that placed near it, but the cradle was moved, and so she ends up in a different bed with somebody that is not her husband. So it was an oral tradition, and Giovanni Boccaccio just wrote it down, and Chaucer, Geoffrey Chaucer, just used it for his Reeves tale, who was kind of angry with a miller, and that's why he told the story about a miller's wife, Well, it's in the Canterbury Tales. It's very entertaining because it has it humorous twist in the end, and so it wasn't actually quite that bad. Um, about church institution, I had this idea that Boccaccio actually hate church institution because his tales start with a tale about the greatest sinner in the world who who is dying and who have to confess his sins, and he ends up lying to his confessor, and he does it so expertly. So he's so good at it that he ends up being buried in the church, and he becomes a local saint, and people actually make pilgrimage to him, to his grave, and all the church officials, all the monks in this book, in these stories, they are all corrupt and immoral. In the Canterbury Tales, we have these people who go on pilgrimage, so they believe in church institutions, they are devoted Christians. We do not find such hatred here, but there are a couple of stories about greediness of monks, and about the fact that you can actually sell and buy forgiveness uh, from sin. So you can buy a piece of paper and your sins will be forgiven and forgotten, which is um, kind of not exactly outrageous, but against, I guess, the idea of Christianity. So we have a couple of tales, humorous tales about monks and about pardoner, um, which are quite entertaining. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I have to tell you that there are a couple of stories that are not written in verse. I forgot to tell you that it's written in Middle English and in verse, but there are a couple of stories that are written in prose, and they are supposed to be very instructional, moralistic tales, um, educational tales, and they are excruciatingly boring. But every everything else is quite entertaining. Um, and I would advise you not to rush it, but to read it a tale a day, or maybe a tale a week. This way, I believe you will remember them better. And I would advise you to read it in Middle English. You just uh, need to make sure that you have, well, a bit of tips. The more modern meaning of some archaic words, and maybe some explanation of sentences. And it's better if your edition doesn't have letters you are not used to. So this Middle English letters. And it's quite doable, it's quite enjoyable, the verse. So I would advise you to take it easier, to read probably one tale a week. And it's quite enjoyable. Um, Boccaccio was a bit irritating for me, but Chaucer is quite enjoyable and I would recommend you to read it. Thank you for watching, goodbye and happy reading!